that when you cut the cards and your hand touched that cards, that there could be a connection between the sensory of the touch to something that we have yet to discover, that in your mind, the seven of clubs popped up. And I was wondering if there's a connection there between what happened with you with the seven of clubs and what many blind people report as being their extra eyesight, or the image from the inner eye.
I'm not sure about that, to be honest. I don't know. I mean, as I say, with my own experience, I wouldn't place too much stock in it because it was a sort of one-off thing. But it could be that paranormal ESP, for instance, is operating not only in a dramatic way with very obvious things, but it could be operating at a low level with us at times.
You talk about hotspots. Could you give us your definition of what a hotspot is?
Yes, this is actually quite complicated because popularly people tend to apply the label hotspot or window area where there's been a rash of, say, UFO sightings or other odd events. I suppose strictly speaking, the term should only really be applied if one can say with some degree of certainty that there's a higher than expected number of incidents. But that's very hard to know, because if you get a rash of reports of UFO hotspots in, say, Hamilton, Ontario, unless you've got comparative data from the neighbouring areas, it's hard to know. The other problem, of course, one of the other problems is that once you get reports coming out, other people might come forward and say, yeah, I saw a UFO that day too. But it may be that if you put the microscope or on another area, you'd find, and made sufficient inquiries, you'd find that there was perhaps just as high a rate of sightings there. So it's a bit of a statistical problem because we don't have reliable comparative data. There's also the confusing factor of military activity. If you're near an Air Force base, there could be misinterpretation of aircraft, and also the factor of hoaxing as well. However, having said that, I think there are some places that one can say, at least for a time, have at least a prima facie case for being called hotspots.
Britain is very well known for Stonehenge. What is your opinion of Stonehenge, and would you consider Stonehenge to be a hotspot?
I'm not aware that Stonehenge itself is a hotspot, but interestingly, an area a little to the west of that, the Warminster area, around the town of Warminster in the same county of Wiltshire, in the 1960s, that became an alleged hotspot. Initially, there were some strange sounds reported in the area. Very soon, it became an area that was reputed to be a hotspot for UFO sightings, but also other anomalies. And this went on. This sort of alleged activity went on for more than 10 years. And one of the problems about this case, skeptics say, well, a lot of the reports from the Warminster area were filtered through a journalist called Arthur Shuttlewood, who had a flowery turn of phrase in his writing, and it's been suggested that he wasn't a very reliable reporter. However, I'm not aware that he literally made things up, and he also spent a great deal of time, his own time, on the local hills, sky watching. So I doubt whether he was an out-and-out fraud intent on misleading other people. It may be that he wasn't a very critical reporter, and maybe he misinterpreted some of the things he saw. But the alleged phenomena in that area don't rely entirely on him. There is testimony from others. So I'm open to the possibility that there was genuine activity in that area.
1-800-610-7035, worldwide toll-free. Our special guest this hour is Peter McCue. He is the author of Zones of Strangeness, an examination of paranormal and UFO hotspots. It's available at Amazon.com and other online bookstores as well. Peter, in your book, you give lots of case examples and also discuss theories. Could you say a bit about the various theories that people have put forward to explain ghostly phenomenon?
Yes, in the book I divide the theories about ghostly phenomena into two categories: naturalistic, that is, theories which account for the phenomena in normal terms,
Hmm.
and psi-based theories. Psi is a term used by parapsychologists to refer to paranormal phenomena, a general collective term. Now, under the naturalistic headings, one obvious approach is to say that, well, when people experience or reportedly experience haunting or poltergeist type phenomena, this is based on a misinterpretation of prosaic events. Another possibility in the naturalistic category is hoaxing. Another theory which has been considered, but I don't think it's very widely applicable, is that underground streams could cause vibrations and unusual sounds, which might be interpreted as spooky phenomena. Low frequency sound, infrasound, has been suggested as a possible cause of some ghostly phenomena. Vibration from seismic activity. But perhaps the most significant naturalistic theory is that ghostly phenomena, and indeed some UFO phenomena, are the result of ambient magnetic fields, either arising from geological conditions or indeed from man-made sources. And there is some evidence suggesting that in some haunted places that there do seem to be unusual magnetic fields, which could perhaps affect the brain and indeed affect equipment itself. Again, a problem, though, I have with this magnetic theory, although I don't reject it in total, I think it doesn't easily account for collective experiences. For instance, if you and I are in a house and we at the same time see a ghost,
right?
We see the same ghost, if it were a magnetic field affecting our brains, you wouldn't expect the content of our experience to be exactly the same, and you wouldn't expect it to begin at exactly the same time. By the same token, if we were sitting together and we took LSD, you wouldn't expect your drug experience to exactly match mine and to begin at precisely the same time. Whereas there are lots of cases of UFO activity experiences and ghostly activity where the phenomena seem to occur to the witnesses at the same time.
But how likely is it, Peter, that two people see the same ghost at the same time?
I can't give you a precise figure, but there are plenty of case examples where this has happened. For instance, in my book, I discuss cases where people are driving and they see another car coming, or the people collectively witness something. So I think that there are quite a few cases on record where people do collectively see the same apparition.
Is there such? I've heard it said that at times people can actually project these images into other people who have an open mind to the power of suggestion. So if you've got one person who has a strong enough will, for example, and you've got 5 or 6 other people who want to see something, they believe in it, that the person with the strongest will can actually project an image into the minds of these other people.
Do you mean telepathically, or do you mean by normal means?
Telepathically. Telepathically.
Oh, yes. Well, under the psi-based theories, which I haven't mentioned yet, one of the psi-based theories is that apparitions, haunting apparitions, and indeed other apparitions, may be produced by telepathic interaction among people occurring at a subconscious level. There was a British researcher, long deceased now, but called Tyrrell, who suggested that for instance, in cases where someone has maybe a fatal accident and a relative at a remote place sees an apparition of the loved one at the time of his or her death, and these cases are known as crisis apparitions. He also suggested that hauntings, recurrent apparitions occurring in particular locations, could be mediated by telepathy. And in fact, he went as far as to suggest that there could be the surviving self of a deceased person who's broodingly reminiscing about his or her past life may somehow trigger off hallucinations in the minds of people living in the previous residence. To be honest, I think there are problems with that theory because a lot of hauntings involve physical phenomena. And Tyrrell's theory doesn't readily account for the physical manifestations which often occur in cases of haunting. So it may be true, but it's not very comprehensive.
But what kind of physical manifestation are you talking about?
I'm talking about object movements, maybe the pulling of bedclothes, the disappearance of an object from one position and its appearance somewhere else. In practice, it's often hard to distinguish between, as you may know yourself, between cases that are sometimes called hauntings and cases that are known as poltergeist cases. People sometimes make a distinction, but it's hard to sometimes distinguish between these two types of case. And a lot of hauntings do involve not only sensory phenomena such as sensations of cold, seeing things, but also minor poltergeist-type activity. I can give you one example, for instance, a case I investigated here in Scotland. A man who's in the house of a family. There had been numerous little incidents over the years, and even before the man was with his current partner. But while he was with his current partner, and one incident was he went to a metal container in his living room one morning to take out 3 20-pound notes that were there and found them missing. They were folded up notes. So they had folded these notes and they were in the tin, but they weren't there when he went to get them. Mm-hmm. And he was quite disconcerted by this. He left the house. He returned at lunchtime that day to find 3 uncreased 20-pound notes lying on his coffee table.
One quick question comes to mind. Was he married?
He was in a relationship. He was. I don't think he was not formally married, but effectively in a partnership.
But you see, at something like this, I ask the question: how do we know?
I don't think anyone else had been in the house between when he left the house.
You see, the question in my mind when I hear something like this, Peter, is how do we know that they are the 3 same bills that he left in the pot? That somebody might.
I don't think they were.
You know, so
that was the point I was making. The notes in the container had been folded and were presumably creased. The notes on the coffee table were the same denomination,
right? But
they looked new. You see, what I think may be going on with this sort of case is that these aren't random phenomena produced by magnetic fields. I think they're orchestrated.
All right, Peter, let's hold it right there. We've got to take our final break for this hour. Interesting conversation with an interesting gentleman. X-Zone Nation, my guest this hour is Peter McCue. He's the author of Zones of Strangeness, an examination of paranormal and UFO hotspots. All you have to do is type in Peter McCue or Zones of Strangeness, an examination of paranormal and UFO hotspots into any search engine, and bang, you'll be able to find it, purchase it online, and it gets delivered right to your door. We'll be back on the other side of this break with our guest, Peter McCue, as the X-Zone continues from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away. With each new extreme weather event or terrorist act, it becomes increasingly obvious that we live in uncertain and challenging times. We all buy car insurance. Why not collapse and catastrophe insurance? Matthew Stein, an MIT-trained engineer and green builder, has written 2 outstanding books to help people prepare, plan for, and deal with everything from minor situations lasting a few days to full-on collapse. Matt's first book, When Technology Fails, is a manual for self-reliance, sustainable living, and surviving the long emergency. This massive book covers the gamut from first aid and emergency preparedness to alternative healing, renewable energy, primitive living skills, and 18th century technologies that could be critical to your comfort and survival in a long-lasting crisis. Matt's second book, When Disaster Strikes, is a comprehensive emergency preparedness handbook and survival guide. When Disaster Strikes is an essential item for every family's go bag. Both books are available at all usual sources. There's a wealth of totally free information posted at whentechfails.com, and author-signed copies may be purchased at mattstein.com. That's www.whentechfails.com and www.mattstein.com.